I'm really excited to have you here.
Happy to be here.
This is going to be the first episode in a series that I'm doing now talking about the Israel-Palestinian conflict. And I think it's super important because, I participate in a lot of talks, I guess, with pro-Palestinians around the world, in all corners of the world, really. And I feel like they always have the same things that they say about what we're doing, wrong here in Israel. And,
Right.
they're always talking about the same things. And I decided that, it's really nice to sit and talk about opinions all day long, which is something that I do a lot, but I actually want to talk about facts now. And that's why I decided to bring people like you that are going to tell us about the facts. So I'd like you to introduce yourself as well and let people know why it was so important for me to have you specifically here.
Well, I'm very happy to be here. And Eden, you're doing a great job, by the way, in our organization. We're honestly very lucky to have you. I'm Yissachar. I am head of research in the Israel Defense and Security Forum. And we're leading national security-oriented research that researches exactly these notions and these topics of Israel vis-a-vis the Palestinians and the greater questions of the Middle East and Iran, relations with the US and Europe, etc. I've always been kind of addicted to the news cycle. It's pretty natural in Israel, but I've always remembered, I actually found a poem I wrote when I was 4 years old,
Wow.
praising IDF soldiers and say how they keep us safe, and then asking a question I think was pretty charming for a 4-year-old. It's like, why does everyone hate us so much?
Wow.
And I don't think I feel like this today, but I see like a more balanced picture. But you imagine how people who grew up here feel like as if the whole world is, coming on you and looking down on you, while you're suffering from such, immense security threats that I don't think people in the West realize as much. I mean, we're surrounded by countries that either we have peace accords with, despite, having waged, serious wars with them. My uncle actually died in the Yom Kippur War in the Sinai Peninsula. Despite the peace accords, we don't have warm relations with these countries. Syria and Lebanon, enemy countries. And we got the greater Middle East and the internal discourse among Israeli Arabs of nationalistic sensitivities and emotions among Israeli Arabs, many of them, that actually makes it a quite complex mix.
Yeah.
I don't think people in the West who are used to live in very homogenous societies really understand the scale and scope of security threats on Israel and the kind of feeling of being under constant threat, the people who grew up here. I think they just consider Israel to be the big, almighty, all-powerful Western country, colonialist country, composed by white Europeans who came here to colonize the Middle East. Voila, the white European right in front of you. And people often misunderstand because I think what they often see is either what they see on the media, which is very often, as we're going to talk about it down the line, but basically I think it's awfully biased and one-sided.
100%.
It's driven, I think, by ideology and not by facts. If they wanted their viewers and readers to know the facts, they would present things, complicated reality in a complicated way, not in such a very clearly partial way. And I think they also consume information from their cycle of like their milieu, basically. It's kind of a social belonging thing. You want to belong to a certain circle of people who think in a certain way. I didn't find many diplomats that I talk with that are having, a different opinion than what other diplomats have. I didn't find many students in campuses, especially in the undergrad level, who possess different opinions than what other people have. And I don't think it's their fault at all. I think that you just grew up in a certain echo chamber that once all sophisticated people around you think in a certain way, that Israel is a big colonialist, that Israel performs ethnic cleansing, that we came here to steal the homes of Palestinians as if we got nothing better to do in life. While you grow up to having these non-negotiable truths that everyone thinks, therefore it's obviously true, I think it's very difficult to shift the paradigm and open people's eyes and make them open their eyes and see what is actually happening in Israel. That is much more complicated than what they're
It's really hard to convince somebody that they have been believing a lie their whole life. Like it's hard to convince somebody that everything that they've been told has a different side to it. It's like, I don't think a lot of people are going to be able to like just, after their whole lives they've been like hearing and believing this thing and be like, oh wait, that's not true.
Yeah. And I think it trickles down from the government level to the people, but it also trickles up, if I could say that. In terms, I'll just give an example about Gaza. Okay, you got the British Prime Minister calling Gaza a prison camp. people say that the President of the United States saying that there is a siege over Gaza. The Secretary General of the United Nations says that the Gaza is a disaster of a biblical scale. But none of it is true. Gaza borders with Egypt. They can leave to Egypt whenever they like. It has a border with Israel. Very naturally, much like our borders with Syria and Lebanon are closed, so is our border with Gaza. And we got tens of thousands of Gazans coming in and out to and from Israel to work, actually, with the work permits. You got 100 million shekels per year.
Wait, you said tens of thousands. Is that on a daily basis?
On a daily basis. Okay. Who come in and out from Gaza into Israel to work. They're great workers. My house was floored with workers from Gaza, from Rafiah, actually. And also people from around Hebron and Jenin and all of that. You had work permits, and that's natural. Any country has a work visa. I don't see Israel, needing to have any other standards than them. And you've got a border, and that's natural. And you also have 100 million shekels per year of health expenditure by Palestinians from Gaza entering into Israeli hospitals, having their health situation taken care of, and they come back to Gaza. And that happens. It even happened to the daughter of the leader of Hamas. Okay, so I just don't see reality this way. And everything I hear in campuses, and I studied in a campus in Paris, right. Everything here in the media just doesn't add up with things that I see
on the floor here. What's going on?
Exactly, in real life.
Why do you think that this conflict is so impossible to solve?
I think that the Middle East works in a different language than what Europe works. How Europe works is Western countries with a tradition of democracy who sit around the table, negotiate, let's meet halfway, yalla bye. In the Middle East, it works by emotions, by religion, by tradition. And I have to say that the European Westphalian notion of putting a rock on the mountain, let's listen to what they say, true and lasting peace in the Middle East. It's a very European notion. It does not happen in the Middle East like that. The Middle East works by tribal belonging, by religious belonging, and that's fine. I respect that. But they need to understand they can't outsource European notions into the Middle East. Israel's democracy, so that's one notion that was outsourced, and that's a blessing. But I don't see our relations with the Arab world work like that. And I'll have to be honest with you, I respect the Palestinians a lot. I don't hate them at all. I don't see them as my enemies. I just think that they were victims of much greater interest, especially by the Arab League and Arab nations, by leaders of terror organizations who are, inspiring young people to go out and document themselves on TikTok, slapping Jews in the light train in Jerusalem or throwing rocks at police officers. And that's kind of, cool. It's kind of fame. You got, your status you get a status symbol, right? Your status on the street is getting a nice upgrade as a result. I just don't think that I can come to them, convince them that actually we should meet halfway. You will be there, we'll be here, and problem solved.
Do you think?
As I don't see myself regarding Temple Mount as a 100% Muslim site with no Jewish heritage, nobody will ever be able to convince me, okay, like this. And just because people from Western Europe come over and say, no, Temple Mount, where Solomon's temple was, where Abraham was having the Isaac's circumcision, where you got, according to the legend, where Adam and Eve were the hill of Golgotha, where the holiest place in the world where you got two Jewish temples. You're going to say, no, this is occupied Palestine. You have nothing to do with this place. You're never going to convince me by arguing that simply because Jordan occupied it for 19 years. It doesn't work here, okay? You can talk here, logos, but here, in the emotion level, it will never work. And I'm not expecting to convince Muslims that they have nothing to do with Al-Aqsa as well. I'm just saying that we need to find a common sense arrangement that works for everyone, with us being the stronger side. Wow. That's really my opinion.
That was really strong. That was that was amazing, because it's so true. I think it's actually ridiculous that Jews cannot show any sign. I remember I was on the website and I was reading, because I want to go and visit the Temple Mount, and I was reading what it says, and one of the things it actually says on the website is you cannot have be praying out loud or show in any way that you're praying. That's illegal. Yeah. What? How can that be illegal? That I want to go to a place that is the most holy place according to my religion, and that's not allowed.
A German friend told me that Jews cannot be allowed in Temple Mount because it set the Middle East on fire. Until, especially because you're German, that would be the one holy site in the world where Jews are not allowed to enter. And ironically, it's the holiest site for Jews anywhere in the world. Yeah. And you see what you're telling me here, that I'm not allowed to go there just because it was going to piss somebody else off. I just don't see it this way. And no matter in what nice, progressive, democratic way you're going to portray it, this is anti-Semitism. By telling me, you, as a Jewish person, wearing your kippah, you're not allowed to enter the most holiest place for you anywhere in the world because it's going to make somebody pissed.
Do you know how many people enter Al-Aqsa Mosque from the Palestinian side? Do you know that?
Tens of thousands a month.
Tens of thousands
a month. Especially now during Ramadan, and I respect that. That's perfectly fine. They go in. There are at least 100,000 people in those mass prayers on Temple Mount. Muslim worshippers, and mostly peaceful. They go there to pray. But you see what's happening, that people are not interested in the facts. They're interested in the underdog versus the strong side, the occupied versus the occupier, the oppressed versus the oppressor. It's gorgeous. It's beautiful. I can't tell it any better way. It's very difficult to argue with emotions of me being so-called a strong country, even though I'm surrounded by enemies and all that. You know, you got the famous Ayat Tamimi, curly, blonde girl raising her fists in front of a soldier. Let's be honest with ourselves. Who are going to sympathize with? The little girl or the soldier, right?
Yeah.
And they are fantastic in it. The hasbara, as we call it, or the Palestinian propaganda externally, could have been any better. We should learn a lot from them, to be honest, because they're wrong, in my opinion. But yeah, you see, right now in Ramadan, the Israeli police does its very best to keep things peaceful. And then you got Hamas and other cynical organizations who go there. Do you think it was spontaneous that you got 800 people armed with bats, with rocks, with firecrackers? Where did it all come from? From out of thin air. So they go there, they deliberately...
cause a scene?
Yeah, they cause a scene.
Cause a
Basically,
mess.
they sort of go out against these police officers, and they beat them, and they throw rocks at them and all that. And most importantly, it's being video shot, and it's uploaded to social media.
Is that what happened here just now, the past week?
And you got... I don't have too much of high expectations from the Arab countries, Saudi, Jordan, all that, although I would expect them in the age of the Abraham Accords, we're all united against Iran, to leave this BS behind, put this to rest, and let's focus on issues that actually matter. And they would rather, rally around the flag, rally their people around the flag, around hating Israel, which is kind of a shame because we've passed that for 50 years now. We thought so, at least. But you got also the foreign ministries of UK and France, even the US to a certain extent, saying, the violence by Israeli police is unacceptable and all that. Excuse me? I mean, you've seen the videos. You've seen how people, bash rocks and stones against police officers. What do you expect? You see Muslim worshippers saying that they were frightened to their teeth by those youngsters, holding bats and throwing rocks. All they wanted to pray peacefully. So
it doesn't matter. They don't want to believe that, though.
The facts never matter.
Yeah.
What matters is the version of truth that you want to believe in.
Yeah.
That kind of, that fits the narrative. That's a shame.
It is a shame. Do you think that, we're not going to generalize, like all Palestinians, but do you think that for the majority of the Palestinian side, this whole conflict is really about land, about wanting a country? Or do you think that it's more for, let's say, for example, the radical terrorist organizations, more about not wanting us here specifically?
I think if we look at the words of Yasser Arafat, who founded the Palestine Liberation Organization actually 3 years before the occupation, 1964, 3 years before the 67 so-called occupation, what he said is that our construction is your deconstruction. If we're going to have Palestine, then the stronger we get, the weaker you need to get, because we cannot coexist. It doesn't matter what he says in English. What matters is what he says in Arabic and what he does. I think Arafat represents some of the Palestinians, not all. And for today, for sure, what happens is that at least 80% of Palestinians, they would support Hamas and not Fatah, which is a more radical group right now. I do think we don't need to romanticize Palestinians with the Western lens. I don't think that I can, buy them off with presence and prosperity. Because I respect them. Okay, I respect their nationalist and religious feelings, and I think they want the entire Palestine and the state from the river to the sea. It's very Simple, to be honest. It's not 67 borders. It's from the river to the sea. They keep saying it in every possible way. It's us that want to place words in their mouths and not to listen to words coming out of their mouths. And I speak to Palestinians, unlike those Western campuses who theorize them. I actually speak to them, and I respect their ambitions. I wholly disagree with them, but at least I'm honest enough to listen to what they're saying. So what I mean by not romanticizing is that I don't think the average Palestinian would be bought off by prosperity, having a nice job, the Western notion of everyone just want to live off their nice, good life. I'm not convinced by it because I'm not like that. You're not going to buy me off by saying, forget about Temple Mount in Jerusalem. You got a nice job. Leave it aside for a second. I'm not expecting this from myself. I'm not expecting this from them. I'm just saying that it's not parallel ambitions. It's not like they want the 67 territories and we want the 48 territories, and that's it. And let's cut it 50-50, Solomon trial, cut the baby in half. It doesn't work like that. These are colliding ambitions. They want everything, we want everything. So in that scenario, I don't think we'll ever have resolution to this conflict. We just need to have a common sense arrangement, and having a strong IDF to counter all these terrorists. They're going to have to live with it because we're on the moral upper hand. We have the moral upper hand and they don't. But I don't think we are expecting them to evaporate anytime soon. They're here, so are we. And we should just figure out a way to live together.
Yeah, I hope that, I always say that that's something that's possible. I actually had a conversation with a friend not too long ago, and she tells me, she goes, Eden, don't you, have hope that, there will be, and I tell her, no, I don't have hope. And she's like, that's such a sad way to live. And I said to her, I was like, I'm living in reality because I see what's in front of me. I served in the IDF. Yeah. I was in combat. I've seen the hatred. Just solving the hate, which I believe is the first thing that needs to happen before everything. Because if they don't stop hating us, it's never going to end.
Education.
So, just solving the hate, it seems near impossible. How can you convince people who have for generations been hating us because that's what they've been taught to stop hating us? So in my head, I keep telling her, no, I don't believe that there's going to be, she's like, why don't you think there's going to be a generation one day that's going to grow up and decide when? Okay, so until, how many more Jews will die until then? People don't understand, and this is what I kind of want to ask you. People don't understand what it's like living every single day with a new terrorist attack, a new attack, somebody else dying.
Just today, every single day.
It becomes a reality. And my sister, she actually asked me yesterday, she's like, what's weird to me? She said, in America, if there was an attack of some sort, people could not go to that area for at least a couple days. They'd be so traumatized. But I feel like in Israel, this attack just happened in the Tayelet in Tel Aviv, and people were back there the next day. Everything went back to normal. Exactly. How is that possible? So I just wanted you to kind of try in some way to explain what it's like. You know what I mean?
I think we're so used to this reality in Israel that there is no other choice. If you remember the Sarona terrorist attack, horrendous, where just two terrorists who were inspired by a movie, by the way, wearing suits and ties and coming to Sarona and just, having mass shooting and people who were just dining and having a nice dinner. And the following morning, you got people just hanging out there, you just clean up the whole mess and the whole shrapnel, and you just move on with your life. All the alarms by rockets coming from Gaza, and people just hang out. Okay, there's an alarm. We go to the shelter. 15 seconds later, yalla, life moves on. I think people often fail to understand how it works in Israel because they don't live this reality. And if we, especially in the end of history, as we were educated after the Cold War in 1990s, there must be something wrong with what we're doing if we're living this. This is everything what I hear from Western diplomats especially, but also my colleagues from campuses, is that something in what you're doing is wrong. It can be resolved by 1, 2, 3, 4. They like to call it internationally agreed parameters. It's a very fancy way of saying you do what we're telling you, otherwise you're doomed. And then problem solved. Withdraw to the 67 borders, stop settlements, divide Jerusalem, all the famous chit-chat. Unfortunately, there was war before 67, so what we're resolving is just going to bring us back to square one. But it just reflects, I think, what the European mindset thinks is going on here. So reversible border disputes, It's reversible. If there's settlements and they make people pissed, stop at the settlements, evacuate everyone, problem solved. You're not going to have any more terrorist attacks in the world. It doesn't work like that because
That's not really what they want. That's
and they
not the
keep
only thing
telling
they
us
want.
what they want. If you check the Fatah and Hamas logos, you got the entire map of Israel, Palestine from the river to the sea. Tel Aviv is called by Hamas a settlement. The settlers from Tel Aviv and Lod and Haifa are our target. That's what the Yahya Sinwar from Hamas is saying. That's what many Israeli Arabs, I don't know if the majority, but many feel this way, and I respect that. They feel Palestinians are under occupation, and they're citizens of Israel who vote in general election. So I think you cannot have just reversible things. Okay, you can point the finger and say the settlements are the problem, Jerusalem is the problem. Is in general the Western mindset of let's take off the table anything that can raise friction. We don't like friction. We're at the age of post-military, post-war. One guy told me, let's just fence out the Temple Mount. Nobody comes in and out, and nobody fights over it. Total misunderstanding of what's going on here.
Yeah.
It's like, fine, let's fence out your bedroom and leave your wife, let the international community take care of your wife, and problem solved. Nobody's going to argue there just because there's you and another lover. It doesn't work like that, and people fail to understand because religion doesn't play a role in their lives, and I don't think they can ever understand it unless religion plays a role in their lives.
And such a central role as well.
I think so, because when I talk to Europeans and they're telling me this, one girl told me that religion doesn't really matter to me. I mean, if someone chooses to be religious, that's fine. I don't judge him. You do what you do in your own home, separation of church and state, set up French Revolution style, and that's fine. The open space is liberal, it's secular, and in your own home you do what you want. Total misunderstanding. There is no Islam and Islamdom as one whole holistic way to look at things, and there is no Jewishness or Judaism and Judaismdom, whatever. It's my whole way of looking at the world. Without Jerusalem, what's my point of living at all?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think the land of Israel is a whole without Jerusalem. That's probably what Abbas Zaki, former Palestinian ambassador to Lebanon, what the Fatah official said. Once you take Jerusalem off the table, once you detach them, the Jews, from Jerusalem, the whole house of cards is going to fall apart because they're going to lose their one source of affinity to the land of Israel. They're going to have Tel Aviv, with the port city, with looking out to Berlin and New York, and not Jerusalem, which is Zion, basically. In the Bible, it's called Zion because it's Zionism. The whole reason why we came back here. I just think it's very sad, and people should at least listen rather than lecture.
Yeah.
That's all.
I know that because I've actually, been next to you through the time that you did this, that you helped pass the law for canceling citizenship for terrorists that commit terrorist attacks. I want to ask you about that. I want to ask you, about that whole process and, your part in it.
Let's start by the obvious, which is that, in my opinion, and apparently the majority of Israeli public, because 106 MKs, members of Knesset, voted for this law, unheard of, especially in this time of social cleavage and rift. So that teaches us something about the way that is a whole consensus in Israeli society, that people who committed heinous terror attacks have no place in Israeli society. So you can't hold the stick in both ends or have it both ways. You can't swear allegiance to a hostile ideology. In this case, the Palestinian Authority, which has a law that says if you commit terror attacks, you are considered Palestinian. That is part of our combat sector. You are a Palestinian soldier by definition. You're going to get cash. That's what they're saying. That's the law. Read the bill. I can send it to you if you want. So you perform terror attacks in the name of a hostile ideology. You murder Israelis. You serve time in prison. You get salary from the Palestinian Authority as a reward for this attack. And then you enjoy all the benefits of being an Israeli citizen. Doesn't work like that. And what we came to say is that if you want to be an Israeli citizen, if you want to play by the rules, then you should play by the rules. Otherwise, you're not playing. And it's not actually in the Western world, especially in the last 10 years, ever since terrorism became unfortunately more common in Europe, it has become the rule rather than the exception in the West. So it often comes with this limitation of only people with dual citizenships and all that. So people like an Australian, someone who has an Australian citizenship and former terror attacks, so they remove their citizenship. At least 22 people who got their citizenship stripped off, and they're no longer Australian citizens, but they got an alternate citizenship. Fine. But then, so as a rule, we do not accept a situation where you enjoy both worlds, as they say. So I and my friend Maurice Hirsch and my friend Yossi Cooperwasser, they were all both high-ranking generals. We authored this report. Basically, we participated in all those Knesset committees, and we heard all of the concerns, I would say rightful ones, by MKs, members of Knesset, basically asking what other country has these kind of laws, especially Western democracies. Many of them, at least 98 countries in the world, rebuke citizenships. 15 countries in Europe, the US, the UK, Australia. So you got a whole, I would say, approval, or the approval by the Western world. This is kind of the rule rather than the exception. And they ask all sorts of questions like, is it gonna pass the Supreme Court, whether it's defendable, whether or not we can leave someone stateless. FYI, you can, just like the UK does. United Kingdom actually has a model that the British model is much more strict than other European models. But stripping off citizenships is not only allowed, it's also pretty common in European countries, actually. You got the 1961 Treaty on Statelessness, basically saying that you can leave someone stateless and strip off their citizenship and throw them off the country if they oppose fundamentally to the notion of that country, if they are acting to subvert that country's national security, etc., etc. All these questions we answered in that report, but he also accompanied the MKs. I gotta say, Maurice Hirsch, the general, actually helped phrasing the legal language of the bill, and it got passed, and was great news.
I just want to make this clear, because I feel like a lot of people in the world, oh my God, they're going to cancel their citizenships now for every person that commits a terrorist attack or someone. I think people don't understand that there are certain levels of things that you have to do in order to get your citizenship revoked. So I just wanted to...
There are 3 conditions that you have to meet. You have to, first of all, be convicted by an Israeli court for carrying out terrorist attacks. You are serving time in prison for these terror attacks, not just some politician deciding.
So you already served, you mean?
You already served or are serving.
Okay.
And number 3, you submitted an application to the Palestinian Authority, signing an application that you are basically part of their combat sector, and you're a soldier of the Palestinian Authority. You perform this terror attack in the name of that hostile ideology, and then basically you get a wage from the Palestinian Authority. I don't know if you know, just challenging you or our viewers, how much money per year does the Palestinian Authority invest for terror funding?
I know, because I edited the videos.
I
edited your videos, so I know, but tell us.
Most of the people that I hear, I was in one of the Western...
I think you said 1.2 million?
Billion.
Billion.
Very good. Shekels.
Yes.
So it's over $370 million per year.
Wow.
Budgeted for wages, salaries, paychecks to terrorists who murdered Jews.
How heartbreaking is that?
Yeah.
Money paid because you murdered someone.
Exactly. And how do you want to make peace with these people? And so I asked in one of the Western embassies, how much do they think? It's like, I don't know, 10 million, 100 million per year, and they were shocked to hear the real number. Just to teach you how much people who are supposed to know anything and everything about the so-called radicals in Israel don't really take interest in knowing basic things about the Palestinian Authority or Hamas or people we have to confront and to deal with, because it doesn't matter. What matters is putting forth your demands to Israel, which is the stronger side, perceived to be the stronger side in the debate. Zero expectations from Palestinians. I challenge you to find one expectation from the Palestinians by all the quartet and internationally agreed parameters and the Geneva Initiative and blah. One expectation from the Palestinian side, none. So I don't think they understand what we're up against, and I just invite them to the IDSF website. Everything's there. It's open. All the numbers, all the data, all the statements. You judge by yourself if we have a peace partner or not.
I think the next thing I wanted to ask you about, which is super important, is something that I get asked a lot on pro-Palestinian debates that I take part in. I get asked a lot about the settlements.
Yeah.
I get asked a lot. Like, they always tell me, like, settlers are constantly attacking Palestinians, and they're terrorizing them in their own homes, and they're stealing their land, and they're stealing their homes every day. They're breaking down a new village and, killing them all.
Yeah.
And so I find that based on facts, I don't really have a lot to answer them. And I wanted to ask somebody who's a professional in this, topic, what actually is going on?
Okay. I'm going to answer you first with numbers, because numbers you can't argue with. I'm obviously not objective, so people are going to say, okay, that's this pro-Israeli who is defending settlers and blah, blah. So I'm just going to say the numbers, and then we can move on, okay? Because saying settler violence and just saying these empty slogans doesn't bring us anywhere. 71 attacks per year by Jewish people who live in Israeli communities in Judea and Samaria, what people call settlers. 71 attacks per year. Terrible, very nasty. People who spray graffiti and punch tires and get physical attacks against people, or root out olive trees. Not okay. Not okay at all. I don't support that at all. In the same way that I don't support rape, murder, and any other heinous crime. And then you got 2.5 times higher than that, the rate of crime in the Tel Aviv metro. And then I ask myself, hang on, if that crime is much, much lower than Tel Aviv, how come they don't get, a certificate for good citizenship over there in Judea and Samaria, those so-called violent settlers? If you got 2.5 times higher crime rate in Tel Aviv, how come we're not talking about the rapist Tel Avivians, the violent Tel Avivians? Because you can't categorize or generalize over an entire population just because some people are criminal or commit crimes. Let's look at the Palestinian side. 6,600 attacks per year. I'm not talking about nasty, unkind things like graffiti and tires and olive trees. I'm talking about slaughtering 13-year-old girls in their bed. Okay? So I'm talking about stone throwing, murdering families. I'm talking about shooting attacks that murder tens of Israelis per year. I'm talking about over 500 attacks that the Shin Bet, our internal intelligence service, thwarts every year. So you got that scale of commitment to jihadism and terror attacks. And then you've got some petty criminals who spray graffiti. How can you compare the two, right? And then I say, fine, it's much sexier to talk about violent settlers because they're Jewish, and hang on, that's where I'm beginning to suspect. You don't want Israel to be in the West Bank, so-called, in Judea and Samaria in the first place. So you just come up with any excuse to slander us for whatever, to paint everyone as criminals. I got an aunt that lives in one of Jerusalem neighborhoods that people consider occupied. Is she violent? My brothers live in a settlement not very far from Rosh Ain in Israel. Are they violent? I don't think so. So, and then you got totally ignored 6,600 attacks by Palestinians, murder, stabbing, shooting, suicide vests, as opposed to 71 cases of graffiti and tires. I'm just not convinced. Whatever you tell me, you're sophisticated, you're Western, you know better than I am how to conduct this conflict. I look at the numbers and I'm not convinced. And when I told that to diplomats, they just hidn't. They were first time in their lives they saw these numbers. Do we have a foreign ministry at all? Do we have an idea of spokesperson at all? Start getting these numbers out, for Christ's sakes.
People don't know these numbers. They don't know. And then, after you tell them this, and you tell them, oh, but this is the difference between the different attacks. You know what they say? They say, okay, so why are you taking their homes then in the first place? They have a right to do what they're doing and hurt you because you're stealing their house and you're stealing their whatever. So what is actually happening with who it belongs to or whatever?
Yeah, because the problem is that you got so many claims just thrown up in the mid-air that it's hard to confront all these balls thrown at you with the same, because they have this mixed salad of accusations that anything and everything in world history is because of us. I just disagree with the premise that we're stealing their homes. Show me one settlement built on the ruins of a Palestinian village. One. All Judea and Samaria. You can't find one. Because all Israeli settlements are built in Area C, where there used to be no Palestinians until they figured that out, and in 2009 started with the Fayad plan to take over the entire Area C. Now we got 80,000 structures there. Totally illegal. Totally Israel.
You're saying before that they didn't exist there?
Nothing. You got A and B territories. You got Palestinians everywhere. And no Israelis are allowed to enter there, much less settle there. And you got the C territories where it's a subject for debate. I just disagree with the premise of we are not supposed to be there in the first place. Just because Jordan, between 1948, 1949, and 1967, occupied it illegally. By the way, no country in the world except Pakistan and the United Kingdom recognized the Jordanian occupation of the West Bank, Judea and Samaria. I don't think we should just presume that there used to be a Palestine there that we occupied, and now we should bring it back to its rightful owners. This is history and facts. You can't convince me with ideology and narrative and progress and underdog. It doesn't work like that. I know in the postmodern world, facts no longer matter unless they work on your favor. But basically, I just don't buy that. And I have, critical mind. And if you know anything else, convince me. I might be convinced. But if you just throw accusations at me without bringing facts or history, then I say, but the entire international community agrees, but it's not legal, but the Security Council decided, but the General Assembly, the United Nations decided otherwise. I don't care. They can decide whatever they want. They can decide that the sun sets in the morning and rises in the evening. I don't care what they decide.
That's something I appreciate about you a lot, actually, because you're a very fact-based person. Like I see you a lot, like in the work that we do together, and I see how in a lot of situations, like you have your opinions about things, but that never matters. Like you're always focused on research, on the facts, and that's like a huge reason of why I'm so excited to actually have you in this interview here.
But I think it testifies a lot about you too. I mean, you're open-minded and you want to know.
Yeah,
things, not just
I want to learn. I always want to learn, 100%. So, okay, when I was in the army, I think I really understood how close the Israelis and Palestinians are living. Like, that to me was shocking. I could not believe, everything made sense. Because I was like, wow, they're always saying, they're attacking each other, they're stealing each other's homes. How can you know really what's going on there? Everything is on top of each other. This person literally builds a rock and it passes the line. This person, it's actually insane, how things work. And I think that not enough people understand really the complications of living in a situation like that, because I think in the areas where the settlers live, it's the most complicated lives of anyone in Israel, because they are constantly living neighbors to people who want to kill them, people who want to murder them. And that is a crazy reality to live in. And honestly, they're the ones being bashed the most. The settlers are the ones being bashed the most.
I think by large, I don't know if large, but parts of the Israeli public too, saying settlers are the essence of our problem. If we just evacuate the entire 67 territories, Shalom al Israel, we're gonna be just fine. Problem is that we had wars before 67. And the other problem is that I'm listening to what Palestinians say, and again, as I constantly say, I respect them. They're admirably consistent, and they tell me they want Palestine from the river to the sea. So I believe them. And if Arabs from Lod and my peers from the Tel Aviv University telling me that they're occupied and they're Palestinians, and with fire and fury, we're gonna revenge for Al-Aqsa.
And they literally go to school with you.
They go to school with me, and they are my peers. And I just walk in the university, and I see them, waving Palestine flags. And say, "We're going to liberate Jerusalem with blood and fire." And I'm saying, "Are you not Israeli citizens? Benefiting from your entire privileges and rights, just like myself?" And then the obvious question comes along, which is, so what is it going to resolve if we evacuate the entire 67 territory? We're going to be stuck with the same nationalistic problem inside Israel, much like we saw in the 2021 Guardian of the Walls operation, where Arabs were having civil riots against their Jewish neighbors, not in the settlements, in Lod, in Jaffa, Tel Aviv, basically, in Acre, in Haifa, in Jerusalem. So what is it going to resolve?
It was insane.
Inside the 48 territories, we got this nationalistic rift. So what is it going to resolve? Nothing. People from the West don't see that at all. They're stuck with it's like a train track. You place someone on a train track and they just, get the go-ahead and green light. Put forth some critical thinking. Open your mind to facts. I told one of my peers from Paris, and she was like, "Oh, you're occupiers, the settlers." And I'm saying, look, you're neither Jewish nor Arab. You're neither Israeli nor Palestinian. You speak neither Hebrew nor Arabic. You never lived here. You never visited here. You don't have a dog in this fight at all. At least have some modesty to be an observer and say, okay, this seems unfair. Okay, I want to learn more about that. Don't come with demands to me because the Israeli-Palestinian issue has long become a public domain and not something we should figure out between ourselves, Israelis and Palestinians sitting around the table.
Everyone thinks that they have the right to come and
Everyone
tell us.
has rights and stakes in this fight, and they really don't. So how about some modesty? You mind your own business. We figure it out. You got enough troubles on your own, of your own. We're going to figure it out between ourselves. You don't need to tell me, understanding absolutely nothing about this conflict, not even being religious, which is, kill me, sue me if you want, but this is a big part of understanding this conflict. So at least have some modesty and don't preach. I think one of the big successes in the Abraham Accords that people came to listen rather than lecture. Okay, what do you want, Arabs? What do you want, Israelis? Okay, that seems fair. That's it. 4 peace accords in 3 months between Israel, Morocco, Bahrain, UAE, Sudan. I just don't see the old ways working anymore. The old dogmas of, it's very clear, cut the baby in half. Doesn't work like that.
Yeah, that's it. I don't. Yeah. People always ask me, like, do you believe in a 1-state solution and a 2-state solution? Do you believe it? I'm like, what do you mean? Like, you're talking about cutting up my country. Like, I don't know.
Two-state religion.
Like, it's ridiculous. It's really, really hard because I think that the moment that I really understood what it feels like to live in Israel, because, you know, I didn't grow up here like you did. I didn't have the privilege of growing up here. Yeah. I fought for it for many, many years, and I finally got here at 16.
You're awesome. I mean,
I forced my mom to understand that I belong here, and I made it here at 16. But I think Operation Guardian of the Walls, I was doing a collab, actually, for Instagram at this restaurant on Rothschild. Okay? Just chilling. And then, like, I'm talking to my best friend, and we're just having a conversation, and all of a sudden, like, I hear sirens, and I'm like, I'm hallucinating. I literally was like, oh, no. It's so much crazy stuff going on recently. Maybe it's like an ambulance. And then I'm like, Morgan, do you hear a siren? Nah. And then she's like, no, I didn't. I'm like, oh, no, that's a siren. And then I look up in the sky and I see rockets in the sky above my head. Like, there's just like a missile above my head. Like 1, 2, 3, 10. 15, and I'm looking up in the sky, and I'm literally standing there in shock, and everyone's running, you know what I mean? It's like everyone's dispersing, and like people are going into staircases, and I'm so in shock, because I'm like, I cannot believe that my reality right now is that I'm having dinner with my friend on the street, and there are missiles above my head right now.
Yeah.
And people want to come to me and tell me, you know what, you deserve it. You know why? Because you took the Palestinians' homes. What does that have to do with the fact that you're trying to murder someone who wasn't even alive at the time that this happened? Like, what? Okay, let's bring this to the question.
I love the way you put it, by the way. It's an amazing story.
It's insane. Like, I honestly didn't know how to accept that was something I deserve.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, yes, you deserve that. People tell me, you deserve that. That's okay because you stole my grandma's house.
Yeah, in a world where you say F borders and the world without borders, it actually matters who owns what territory. That's very consistent.
So I want to know, really, what do you think that Israel should do in those kinds of cases?
Okay. You're talking about how to resolve the territorial.
Not how to resolve, because resolving is too hard. Because there's so many different. But like, what should the IDF's response be in those seconds right there? Like, honestly, like when it comes to my opinion, like immediate attacks to like completely, you know what? It's unheard of. Yeah. Like people always say to me, you know, how can it be that like, oh, they shoot rockets and nothing happens? Like, oh, there's a couple airstrikes and it's all targeted. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that's okay. That's good. We don't want to hurt anyone who's innocent, who didn't do anything wrong. Right. But like, it's hard to stay sane in a place where they're trying to harm people who are innocent, specifically aiming. They're not really aiming, but they know that it's going to places where they can't know if it's going to hit in the army base or citizens. They don't know.
It actually fell in kindergartens before, rockets by Hamas.
I've seen
it actually fell on schools. It fell in my own home city, by the way, where I pass every day. And there was an alarm in the early days of Guardian of the Walls, and it actually hit a bus. Yeah. And the bus exploded in the middle of the city.
The hypocrisy. It's the hypocrisy that kills me. They all day, you're killing children. That's their one top thing that I'm always told.
Yeah.
How could you? You're proud of being in the IDF. You're killing children.
Yeah, every day. I was confronted by a
You're
Palestinian
killing
activist.
children.
Yeah, they are.
They're killing children. Like they don't care. They don't care about our children.
Yeah.
They care about their children.
I think many Palestinians are not happy with this mess. They wouldn't want this conflict to continue. But on the other hand, they also have these nationalistic feelings of you're not supposed to be here in the first place. Not here in Jenin, in the West Bank. Here in Palestine, in Tel Aviv, in Haifa, in Beersheba, in Jerusalem. They say it constantly. I talk to Arabs all the time, to Palestinians, and I respect that. I wholly disagree with them, and as I said, I'm not trying to change their mind. I'm just saying I should be stronger to make sure that they don't have the upper hand militarily. But I'm saying that when it comes to hasbara, as we call it, propaganda, or explaining what you do, Israelis often fall into this trap of saying, people accuse us of murdering children. And say, yeah, what would you? I remember interviews with many prime ministers, debates in campuses where they say, you murder children. Say, what would you do if your house was under attack? What would you do if you shot missiles at London or New York? This is really not the way to respond to these accusations, because that would be, one, agreeing with the premise of the speaker, and two, you're basically ignoring, you just accuse you of murdering children, which you don't. So how about you take care of that heinous accusation first and that? So, you know me, I love facts and numbers. Let's go back to the facts. 200 children died in Gaza? That sounds terrible, right? Based on what? A UN report. It looks fantastic because it's called the United Nations. It has this aura effect. You should look it up in Wikipedia, by the way, or anywhere else which is more reliable than Wikipedia. The aura effect, it's actually something that gives credibility. The United Nations report. They often take numbers from B'Tselem, from Peace Now, from NGOs who are extremely biased, and they're funded by foreign money, but whatever. UN reports about the Gaza wars, and they say, well, 700 citizens were killed, asterisk, based on the previous appendix to this and that report. So I did a bit of digging, and the report was actually based on various reports on the media. Fine. What media, what reports, they never said, and by the Gaza Health Ministry, aka Hamas.
Wow.
So I'm supposed to defend myself against accusations based on numbers provided by Hamas.
A terrorist organization.
A terrorist organization recognized
that has
as such
every
by
interest.
the EU and by the United States. So I cannot even start to debate with you because you're basing your accusations on Al-Qaeda style terror group. So that's one thing. Israelis should understand that. And second, it also comes to the accusations of, I watched Piers Morgan. I love him. Nothing personal. I'm just a
I love him
case
too.
in point. Love this guy. Great journalist. Very professional. But it's a case in point. I'm not blaming him personally. Kristen Amanpour, love the journalistic work that she does. I'm not blaming anyone personally. I'm just saying it's very common to live in this echo chamber. Somebody needs to put some order here. We accuse Israeli officials, prime ministers, ministers, etc. of 88 Palestinians were killed since the beginning of the year. 146 Palestinians were killed last year alone. That's the deadliest year since we started measuring, as if we're talking about iceberg melting or some climate change or something. So we get measuring. Fine. Never measure murdered Jews, by the way, just Palestinians. And then
Never.
Israelis often fall into this trap of saying, yeah, but they want to kill us. And
but that's the problem.
But 3,000 years, but we've been here before, and they're wrong, and we're right. Don't agree with the premise of the speaker. Let's look at the numbers. And I went into the numbers, actually. 146, great. Let's look. Ibrahim Nabulsi. He's a guy who actually murdered several Israelis. He was a TikTok star who was shooting around Nablus and terrorizing the population. 12
How old
terrorists.
Was he?
19 he was. 12 terrorists from the Lion's Den terror group, the TikTok guys. You got a Hamas terrorist firing at civilians who was shot down. You got 50% of them were actually throwing stones, Molotov cocktails, and IEDs, like improvised explosive devices, at soldiers. There was a firefight between a Palestinian combatant and an IDF soldier. Thankfully, the IDF soldier is more trained, and he shot the Palestinian combatant down, the militant.
Thank God.
So that was counted as killed Palestinians. Okay, so you got 2,800 killed Nigerians and Africans by the French military. No. You got 2,800 terrorists of Boko Haram killed by the French military. That makes much more sense. Okay,
Yeah.
you got 100,000. No, you got
They paint the picture
Yeah.
as if these people were doing nothing wrong. They like to
Right.
leave out the fact that they just happen to be aiming a gun or a weapon
Yeah.
at IDF soldiers. Sometimes it's not a gun, sometimes Molotov cocktails, sometimes it's rocks. You know, I got a rock thrown at me during my IDF soldier.
Your knee, right?
Yeah, my
I
IDF
remember that
service.
story, yeah.
I literally have a hole in my knee. Like, they throw that stuff hard. Like, if that hits you in the head, like, you know, it could
It
kill you.
already killed a girl called Adele Beaton, an
It's
8-year-old
killed
girl.
a couple times.
I just remember myself coming back from hospital. Actually, my dad was hospitalized there. He said, fine, it's Friday night. Let's just forget about everything. We got enough troubles of our own in the family as it is. Let's just watch the news. Great idea in Israel to chill, right? And then we got a terror attack in Jerusalem, Neve Yaakov, the 7 murdered people in front of a synagogue. Terrible. And then what I love to do is open foreign news, news media. Nothing, as if you were opening, news from a different planet. How creative should you be to describe a terror attack as 2 Palestinians shot dead by Israeli police in Jerusalem after a suspected terror attack? What? I mean, how crazy can it be? In another synagogue attack, it was
wrong.
murdering people with machetes and knives and guns, storming into a synagogue and murdering peaceful worshippers. And they said, 5 Israelis and 2 Palestinians were killed in clashes in Jerusalem.
They just
Occupied Jerusalem. And then they changed it to Israeli police officers killed 2 Palestinians. How do you expect, and I actually was in a British school, and I showed them these headlines by The Guardian and by Reuters and others, and I said, how do you expect to be to be savvy, to be knowledgeable about the conflict if that's what they're feeding you all day? I mean, they're actually looking down on you and saying you don't have the right to have your own objective opinion. We're going to tell you what to think instead of providing you with the facts. Then you can decide whatever you want. It's occupation. Israel should have been in the first place. Fine. But there's facts on the table. And you shouldn't paint, 2 militants firing an IDF soldiers.
They're lying.
And then the soldiers fire back as 2 Palestinians killed by IDF forces. That's it. You don't need to know as a reader what happened 2 seconds beforehand. So then let's always take one step back, ask ourselves what the context is. I don't think the Israeli police just walks randomly in Jerusalem killing Palestinians. I don't think that's the case at all. Doesn't that happen? What I know to be true. So at least as readers, let's be, if we care about truth and facts so much.
And we care about this conflict so much, right?
So much, even more than us.
Then at least do the research
We're going to look down
correctly.
you Israelis and teach you, lecture you how to resolve the conflict, because what do you know? You just live here, right?
Yeah.
And instead of doing it in the age of where everyone professes to be so worried about the erosion of truth,
Yeah.
fact-checking, at least be honest with yourselves.
Yeah.
Provide the real facts, the real numbers, the real description of what happened, and then you have your own opinion.
Yeah. So one of the things that pro-Palestinians say to me, wow, the most, they don't stop. What about Shireen? What about Shireen? You guys killed Shireen. She was a reporter. And they act like every single time they say this to me, it's a new thing. Like, I never knew about this. Like, it's world news. Everyone knows.
I had a big fight with a good friend of mine from Europe. Basically, she was accusing the IDF of deliberately murdering a journalist. And my question to her is, let's stop and take a step back for a second. Why would the IDF murder a journalist? It's not the commands, it's not the values of the IDF. I don't know any situation that me as a soldier would get a command, an instruction to kill a journalist. It's not in the operational targets, objectives. IDF soldiers are often put in real life danger in order to go to these Palestinian cities and arrest people. It's not in our checklist to murder journalists. It's not the objectives of the IDF. In the same way, people just accuse us of being, diabolical, with pointy ears, being just mean and murdering Palestinians and stealing their homes and murdering journalists. In the same way, we should take a step back and ask ourselves, why is there border between Israel and Gaza? Why has the police arrested people on Temple Mount? It's not because for the fun of it. Why have 100 Palestinians were killed last year alone? Not because we love killing Palestinians, because they were terrorists who were shooting at soldiers and they were shot back at. So people just accuse us of just cheap propaganda that is very catchy. And people would even, not just Twitter clowns like, Susan Sarandon and Roger Waters and Bella Hadid, I'm never going to convince these people. I kind of love Susan Sarandon about her movies, so it's kind of ruined my childhood, but that's fine. But I just don't think that people act rationally. Let's look at the facts. There is zero evidence that IDF soldiers killed Shireen Abu Akleh. Zero. Okay? Round. If you have an evidence, no, but CNN said, but Bellingcat said, fine. There is zero evidence that IDF soldiers killed Shireen Abu Akleh. Prove if you have any other proof. Why would IDF soldiers murder a journalist? No explanation provided. And then you gotta imagine the situation. You got Jenin, a firefight between IDF soldiers who are trained to pinpoint Palestinian terrorists, very precise, and you got Palestinian militants who just spree and fire and anything they see. And you see the video and you say, wow, how come 100 people were not killed there, not just one journalist?
Yeah.
Just spraying all over their neighborhoods. It's like they don't care that there are civilians there. I honestly feel sorry for people who live in Jenin for living in such a reality. And then you got IDF sending a force a few days later to try to figure out what happened there. And then Palestinian militants fired and killed General Noam Raz, who was actually killed because the IDF sent a fact-finding mission to see what happened and caused the death of Shireen Abu Akleh and gather evidence. So nobody cares about all these things because it's easy to blame Israel. Next comes the funeral thing, which I confess looks very bad.
It was, wow.
Let's just be honest with ourselves.
Such a thing. Right. Everyone was like, look what they did. They're beating up people going to a funeral.
Right. And that just looks bad.
It does.
And that's bad pictures. And
they're like, explain that. Explain that.
Right. And I don't profess to be telling you that it is actually a great achievement to Israeli propaganda hasbara for having this kind of video. But if we actually try to separate, mind and heart for a second, let's not think out of our emotions, but out of our logos, our mind for a second. Why would Israeli police officers go and beat the crap out of innocent people carrying a coffin? It never happened in Israel's history.
Because we're so bad.
Yeah, because we're so mean, because you're occupiers. What? One second. Why would we do that in the first place? Let's take a step back. No explanation was ever provided. And then Baruch Yadid, one of our generals, took a close snapshot of the video and started to ask himself, who are these people carrying the coffin? Apparently, there was a demonstration of strength by Fatah. There were high-ranking Fatah warlords carrying this coffin, and Israeli police was actually asked by Shireen Abu Akleh's family to take back the coffin stolen by these Fatah militants so the family can have their own kind of funeral.
How do you know that?
All right, so our General Baruch Yadid actually looked into, because it looked weird, right? I mean, why would the Israeli police just beat up innocent people who were carrying a coffin in a funeral? Never happened in Israel's history. And so he actually focused on the faces and started looking up. And it turns out that in as much as the Israeli-Palestinian conflict does no longer belong to the people of the region, it belongs to NGOs, the United Nations, and student associations and all that, so is the funeral of a journalist who was very, very unfortunately killed in Jenin. More than 200 journalists were killed around the Middle East in the past few years, but only Shireen Abu Akleh is being covered. Why? Because Israel. Now, the Fatah people who were actually carrying their coffin were warlords who were probably paid to do that. Just some of the names, and if you follow Baruch Yadid on his Telegram, he's actually a master in the Palestinian arena. So one of them was actually Rajai Haddad. He is a Fatah activist who was in 1980 he murdered a Jewish person called Gabriel Hirschberg in the old city of Jerusalem. He's a big warlord. He served time in prison. He actually, Abu Mazen, President Abbas from the Palestinian Authority, kissed his forehead one time. He is one of the big activists of Fatah. Next come Mahmoud Fatiha, one of the big student association activists from the engineering campus and he studied in Jordan, and he's a sympathizer with the nationalist faction of Fatah. Omar Abu Khder, he's 34, resident of Shafat. He was also a Fatah activist, and he's also a big organizer of rallies of Fatah. And what we have here is a very cynical attempt by Fatah to kidnap a coffin.
Why? Why do they want to kidnap
Because Hamas is much, much more popular in the Palestinian street. We just had a year before Operation Guardian of the Walls, where basically Hamas was a star and shooting 4,000 rockets at Israel and encouraging youngsters to burn down Jewish cities in Israel and all of that. And almost 80% of Palestinians support Hamas, as opposed to Fatah, who is considered, like the Palestinian Authority, considered to be corrupt and detached from the Palestinian street. There was no election for 16 years for a reason in the Palestinian Authority, even 18 years, because of the fact that the Palestinian Authority knows that Hamas is going to get a landslide majority. And Fatah sees this and sees Shireen Abu Akleh and said, I have a perfect opportunity for a lifetime to regain my status in the Palestinian street. So Fatah activists, warlords, kidnap a coffin of a journalist who was very unfortunately killed in a battle zone, in a firefight.
Which I have to say, she knew what she signed up for, being in such a complicated, at the end of the day, no one expects to die. Obviously, of course, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that, she kind of, knew the risks to her job being in the most complicated.
I mean, so many journalists, unfortunately, died in conflict zones around the world the past years, all the time. Only in Israel's case, it was so much highlighted, and Twitter was on fire, and everyone was concerned and outraged. You gotta ask yourself why, in Israel's case, we are being accused for deliberately murdering here, despite having zero evidence. Remember the age of post-truth? Everybody's so concerned about fact-checking. Fact-check this, please. And then you got a rally all around Jerusalem, thousands of Palestinians having a massive rally, instead of a nice, quiet family funeral, which is what her family actually asked. I mean, her family actually turned to Israeli police, saying, these activists stole Shireen's coffin. Please bring it back. That's exactly what the Israeli police was trying to do.
Wow.
I confess it looked bad, but, I mean, facts are facts. And they attempted to bring the coffin back to her family. That's all.
Can you imagine? These terrorist organizations don't care in the slightest about anyone. They don't care. And what's interesting to me? People think that in some world they do, because what they're doing is to protect the Palestinian people. They don't care about the Palestinian. They don't care about them.
They don't care the slightest.
They don't care.
I care about the Palestinian people much more than they do.
Yeah.
Because I hate Hamas, and I think that they're being cynical about the whole Palestinian narrative. And
it's so hard to live in a reality where you have to constantly remind people, no, this is not a government. This is a terrorist organization. You have to make the separation. And I think that as a people of the world, we should be not only fighting terrorists here in Israel, we should be fighting world terrorism, and Hamas and Fatah and these people being one of them, these organizations being some of them. We should all be fighting, we shouldn't be, I always tell my friends, it's like people choose a basketball team. I'm pro the Israelis. I'm pro the Palestinians. No, you guys are pro human life and innocent people being able to, live a peaceful, quiet, happy life, and against people murdering people. You guys, that's what it should be, right? But that's not the reality. What it is that it's people are against you murdering Palestinians, but not against Palestinians murdering you. Because they're pro the Palestinians.
But you gotta admit,
you understand?
It's so popular, it's so trendy, it's so sexy, it's so
Bella Hadid.
Yeah, I was studying in a campus in Paris. Most people were just fine. I think it's mostly the undergrads who are doing all the noise, and that's fine because they're still young and have no clue about. That's fine. Some of them, not all of them, of course. But then you got, people who wave Palestine flags in the yellow jacket protests in Paris. What? You got protests against government policy about the pensions and about gas prices. Why do you wave Palestine flags? Because this is no other foreign flag was there except, the French flag and Palestine flag. You got to ask yourself at some point, how cynical can it get? Where,
Black Lives Matter.
Campus, you got a Che Guevara. People open up their laptop in front of me, so you got stickers, you got Che Guevara and Pride flag, which was great. I have no issue with that. And you got, and then Antifa and Palestine.
Yeah.
Why? Because there were unification of struggles.
What is that? Why is there that relation between the Pride flag and being pro-Palestinian? Why is there that relation?
I don't see the relation at all.
I see so many people who are like, if you believe in Pride and you're like that, then you have to be pro-Palestinian as well. If you are black, you have to be pro-Palestinian.
Yeah, it's the unification of struggles, of minorities, of oppressed. That's really the tier based theory
Oh,
by,
yeah.
by progressives. And I can't tell you I understand it entirely because I'm not like that, but I can see what they're saying. Basically, we're all oppressed, therefore we should reunite under one umbrella. And I just don't see pride flag that represents tolerance and accepting and including people with a Palestinian flag that says if you're gay, you're probably going to get hung or worst, I hate to say decapitated by those people a few weeks ago who murdered a Palestinian from Hebron, kidnapping him. He was actually in a hostel in Tel Aviv. A resident of Hebron fleeing to Tel Aviv, he got a refuge there, kidnapped him from Tel Aviv back to Hebron, and very, very brutally murdered him. These videos were all over Telegram and Twitter.
So sad.
Yeah, I don't see people caring about that at all. At all. Had they cared about Palestinians, they would actually not support Hamas, not criticize Israel for things it never did. And it's not just criticism, it's also giving a backwind. Instead of adding fuel to the fire, basically encouraging those militants and those extremists to keep going because they see how sympathizing all of these so-called human rights groups that have nothing to do with human rights cheer them up and add fuel to the fire and support them, sometimes financially, sometimes with propaganda. And it's just so sad. It's so cynical. You're supposed to have a group that's concerned about human rights, and you see them support people like the People's Liberation Front, which has nothing to do with human rights. But that's a sad world we're living in.
It is. It's very sad. And I have one more question that I want to
Please.
ask you, and then if you have something else that you want to add afterwards, you can. I just want to say, to finish, where does the word Palestine come from?
Woo! How long do we have? How much time do we have? So basically,
when did they start saying it more? Where did it originate from?
I actually wrote an article about it, and it's I can send it to you if you want. It's I start by saying that I don't look down on Palestinians at all. I respect them for their beliefs. And people who say there is no such thing as a Palestinian people should be more precise, in my opinion, and not be so offensive, because Palestinian people certainly exist today. There's a Palestinian Authority recognized by Israel. Certainly when you see so many people believing that they belong to a group that I can't tell them as the big Israeli, it's all imaginary.
You don't exist.
You don't exist. So there is a Palestinian identity, but it has developed over the past century. It hasn't existed since antiquity. When people say that Jesus was Palestinian, he wasn't. Okay? When Saib Arikat, who already passed away, said that he is a son of
People told me King David was
I mean, everyone's Palestinian. So you see how history is being rewritten by people who profess to be worried by the erosion of truth and fact-checking and disinformation and all that. Palestine was actually originated by the Peleshet, by people who came from down as sea comers from Greece, who were red-headed, and they came from around Greece to settle where today is Gaza. They were mentioned in the Bible. And they have nothing to do with today's Palestinians, let me assure you. Now, how do I know that? Because 1,000 years, more or less, after the last historic account was written on them, they had a big fight with King David and all that. The Roman Emperor Hadrian had the Bar Kokhba revolt, the big Jewish revolt in 136 AD, basically challenging the Roman rule, the Roman Empire's rule over the land of Israel. And there was a Jewish revolt, and unfortunately it failed. And then they decided, okay, that's the way you want to play? No problem. He changed the name from Provincia Judea, the Judea province, coming from the word Jewish, of the land of Israel, to Provincia Syria Palestina. Because there was Assyria, the Assyrians, today's Syria, on the north, and then you got the Pleshet from the Bible. The only problem is he just, recycled a name that did not exist for 1,000 years. He just sought to disconnect the Jewish people from its homeland.
How do you know that that's what he thought?
Well, it was basically both documented by contemporary people and by changing, the act of changing the name is very radical. It says something. He also changed the name of Jerusalem, from Jerusalem, Yerushalayim, the city of the Jews, to Ilia Capitolina, right? So the name Ilia Capitolina was thrown to the dustbin of history, and somehow Palestine survived, because I don't need to tell you that people often seek to detach the people of Israel from the land of Israel. Mm-hmm. And the name was in archives for almost 2,000 years. Nobody mentioned it, nobody used it, not even Muslim conquerors who were here in the land of Israel for over a millennia. Nobody called it Palestine. Nobody. And that teaches us something. Even you had an Ottoman rule, you had an Ahmadi rule, Umayyad rule, all Muslim, and nobody actually, the Ottoman Empire, right before the British arrived in 1917, Ottoman Empire divided between the province of Beirut and the Mutasarrifat, or the Department of Jerusalem. It was not called Palestine. British people came and they called the region Palestine because this is the name they were used to back from the Roman times. It's a Western name. It's not an Arab name at all. They called Palestine all the territory from the sea to the border of Iraq, both the land of Israel and today's Jordan or Transjordan. And then it was changed in 1922, cut where the Jordan River is. Okay, this is Palestine, the land of Israel, from the river to the sea. So basically, both Jews and Arabs who lived in the British Palestine were Palestinians. In the same way, the British people could have called it Ceylon, as they renamed Sri Lanka, or Guam, or, I don't know, Burma, as they renamed Myanmar. And today's Palestinians would be Burmese or Ceylonians. They just revived a name that never existed and Muslims never used.
I just want to clarify that, though, because I don't want people here being like, oh, he said that Jews are Palestinians. Oh, he said that. No, that's not what he said.
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make that very clear, okay? Jews are not Palestinians, like, the nation, because they existed.
No.
It's not what it is. What he's saying is that if he would have named it, Cucumber, then we would have been Cucumberians.
Exactly.
Because that was the name of the region that we were born in, living in.
Please show me. And I am one of those who actually believe that there is a Palestinian people today. I'm not denying it.
There is one today. There are people today. It's in front of our faces. How can you deny that?
Somebody called the Palestinian Authority, and we actually signed a peace treaty not a peace, but an accord with them. We recognize it. It's dead. It's over. There are Palestinian people today. But it's very different from saying there is a Palestine today.
Yeah.
Okay? There is no Palestine today. If you want Palestine to be established, why do you push Israel or pressure Israel to enact the two-state solution? If there's already two states, why would we initiate the two states? If there isn't two states today, it doesn't make sense, right? Not, following? Right. So I'm not judging people who say we should establish a state called Palestine. It's fine. But remember what we told you at the beginning.
Instead of our state.
No. Yeah, I also don't. I mean, I'm saying it's fine, and it's a general notion. It's fine to believe in it.
Yeah.
I'm not for it, but you can't have it both ways. Both claiming that there is a state called Palestine and supporting a two-state solution because there isn't one right now.
Yeah.
If you you know me, I like to start by the facts and the numbers and the figures, and then make a conclusion. It's fine to believe that we should establish a state called Palestine. You can't rewrite history. Okay, I'll go to education, I like to pre-military programs, and I talk to students and I tell them, you shouldn't rewrite the past in order to write the future. Okay? There is a past, there is history, there's facts. Now let's write the future. If we should evacuate the whole 67 territories, 50-50, something, no clue. For now, please don't rewrite history in the service of your narrative.
Yes.
Okay? And it's important for people to realize that, again, people who are calling themselves Palestinians today, it's perfectly legitimate. There is no entity called Palestine. It was never occupied because was nothing to occupy. There was a kingdom of Jordan who had a war with Israel in 1948, and Egypt who had a war at the same time, along with 7 other Arab nations. Israel just wasn't strong enough militarily to occupy what's today West Bank and Gaza. Please tell me, when was Jerusalem ever divided? Never in history. When is the land of Israel divided into Israel and the West Bank and Gaza? Never in history. And at least I am being honest enough, and I am listening to Palestinians and not lecturing them, and I can hear them saying, we want Palestine from the river to the sea. We don't want the 67 territories. That's admirably consistent. What the West says is, no, Palestine is West Bank and Gaza. Two strangely separated
they don't agree with
units,
that.
departments of the same land. Is it a historic homeland? Two strangely separated units? Obviously, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. But saying, no. It doesn't matter what happened. This is the narrative. Everyone agrees on that. Believe. Or else. I'm sorry.
Even the Palestinian people don't believe that.
The Palestinian people don't believe that.
Yeah.
And I'm actually more pro-Palestinian than them in that sense, right? If you can consider it that way. I don't think we should establish a state called Palestine in Judea and Samaria. I think it's a great danger to Israel's security. We should find another way to figure it out, separate between populations and all that, let them govern themselves, fine. But you can't rewrite history in the name of your political ideology. It doesn't work like that.